So the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm Marcia Teele, and I'm your host, and I'm so glad to say that we are in our third year of providing this valuable educational program to not only caregivers, but also to other healthcare professionals who need and want to know more about what a caregiver goes through. So thank you for joining us today. If you're listening on local radio, that would be in Southeast Florida, you can also join us live stream, and that is on our website, which is www.caregiversolutions.info. So however you're here, I'm glad that you are. We have another wonderful program for you in this new year. We're going to be talking to a family, two siblings, two daughters that went through an ordeal with their parents. Not only did the mother have dementia, but the dad also had some health issues. And it became a big family affair, as most times dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's issues does, because it's not something that just affects the person or the single caregiver. Many times it's involving neighbors and friends and family, and it takes a village, actually, as one doctor said, to care for a person with dementia. So if you're a family caregiver, I'm very glad that you are joining us, because when we talk to other family caregivers, you get to hear their story, not because it's so different, but maybe because it's so much the same. And although everyone's circumstances are different, there's always a thread that relates to somebody that connects you because you're dealing with dementia issues and all the emotions that go along with it, including anger and denial and grief and sadness and lots of other emotions. And it's just so difficult to sort through that and get through it. But today we're going to be hearing what I call the rest of the story. A few weeks ago, we heard from one of the daughters, Heidi Hazelcorn. She had called in from Fort Myers, Florida, and we talked to her about a wonderful celebration ceremony that the Hazelcorn family had for their parents and why it was important to celebrate and what it meant to them. And so I promised at that time we would bring in another sibling. There's actually three. Unfortunately, Faye's not able to be with us this evening, but the other sibling, Judy Hazelcorn Light, is going to be joining us via video, and she's calling in from California. And we're going to be speaking to both of them about the experience and what it meant to be far away from parents when both of them became where they needed family there and needed assistance. So we're going to get started. And so let me see if we can bring on Heidi and Judy. Hello, girls. Are you there?
I'm here.
Heidi,
here.
Are you here?
Yep, I'm here.
Wonderful. I see Judy, hello, calling in video from California. And Heidi is calling in again from Fort Myers, Florida. So I'm so glad to have both of you here, your sisters. And, you know, you guys have really been through a lot with your parents. So we want to, you know, go back in time and talk a little bit about how this all started, because it's important for people to know from the beginning. A lot of our caregivers are just joining us, brand new, fresh in, just found out about the program. And so they have a lot of questions, obviously, because people aren't trained how to be caregivers. And so I want to start with both of you, and I'm going to address you if possible so that we, you know, can hear everyone. And I'm going to start with you, Judy. You're all the way in California. And
Yes.
did your family ever have any dementia related issues before your mother was diagnosed?
Yes. Well, actually, my mother-in-law was a single woman and living alone, and she had Alzheimer's, and so we worked with her and suffered with her for several years, and she was also far from us, but she was driving distance. So I had the unfortunate experience with her, and so when it came to our own mother, I was able to see the signs and pick up on what was happening when my father and maybe some other family members were in understandable denial, because it's nothing any family wants to deal with if they can help it. So, actually, ironically, I met Marcia from a distance from California. I called in. I was looking for a dedicated Alzheimer's home and found Marcia, who was the marketing director at Arden Courts in Delray Beach. And that was very helpful. And we had many conversations before my dad and I, I was on a visit before my mom was even interviewed or any of that. We had several conversations from afar, which were very comforting and helpful. And my mother-in-law was never she was in a home, but there's always a stage with people where they go from being able to live independently and not, and it's a constant. If you're from afar, it's the most challenging, I believe, because you're trying to suss this out from a distance.
Right. Right. So that's why, you know, it's so important for us to talk about this, because a lot of families are far away from their loved ones when this strikes, and it's very difficult. So we're hoping today to give some insights into that and some tips and all that. So you had some experience with a mother-in-law, and this was prior to your mother having any problems. So you had a little bit of experience and background with that. Now, Heidi, what about you? You're in Fort Myers, Florida. Your parents were living in South Florida. What about you? Any personal experience before your mom?
No, I didn't have any, but because I am closest of my siblings and myself, I visited most frequently, and I noticed things that I would mention to my sisters, and Judy was right on it immediately because she had that experience with her mother-in-law. But I noticed, like, if we'd play cards, my mother, there were things that just weren't clicking. So I would mention these to Judy, and Judy, who already was fully attuned to what was going on, kept saying, look, this is what's happening. And so I witnessed it a lot more than Judy did, but I reported to Judy, who was a lot faster on the uptake than my father, me, or my other sister.
Okay, so you were more boots on the ground because you lived the closest to them. Now, tell me, Heidi, how long were your parents married, and give me a little bit of insight into their personalities.
They were married 68 years. They would have been married 68 years this year if they had both survived till September. And they met in high school. They were high school, boyfriend, girlfriend, and personality-wise, very opposite, but complemented each other beautifully.
And from what I know of the family, would you describe their relationship as a love story?
Oh, definitely. It definitely was. It was just, yeah, it was unbelievable in a lot of ways. But they fought. This wasn't, but there was just a very deep, abiding love, and they respected each other and honored each other, and it was wonderful to experience and to witness and to be a part of.
That's great. Now, do either of you remember your grandparents? And if so, do you think there was any dementia or Alzheimer's in their lives when you were growing up?
Well, our maternal grandparents, no. Actually, I know that my aunt, my grandmother's sister, there were several siblings that did have Alzheimer's and dementia, but we weren't that close with them. We didn't see them that often. But with our own grandparents, only at the very end, my grandfather, at the very end of his life, did we see that. So really, it was out of our frame of reference, wouldn't you say, Heidi?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
And my father's parents, my grandfather, paternal, our grandfather died early and wasn't so much a part of the picture.
So this became a new issue then for the family, especially for your father, with being married to your mom for so many years. So I know, Heidi, you kind of mentioned one thing that you noticed when you visited your mom was that she couldn't play cards so much anymore.
Right.
Was she a really good card player?
She was a phenomenal card player. And we'd play a game, and she'd put a card down and then look up at me, like in a really childish way, that, like, did I do the right thing? And I would sort of be shocked, but I'd say, oh, no, Mom, you can't put a red 10 on a black 3. I mean, just basic card stuff if you're playing solitaire or whatever. She on some level knew that she was very tentative about a lot of stuff where before she was not.
So that wasn't her personality to question things. She was more of a...
Not at all.
Yeah, direct person. So when you happened to observe this, did it cause you alarm, or did you just think it was curious? And then were there other telltale signs that you noticed, Heidi?
Well, there were other telltale signs. There was, they were all. I don't want to be. They just saddened me because I realized that something was wrong. We were driving somewhere once, and she got lost, and then started crying, and that's when I knew this. I'm not just, because I think I sort of was in denial too, just like my dad was. And I said, well, she can forget. But when one time we were driving somewhere and she got lost and she started crying, and she said to me, this is the worst part of this, is I don't remember things. So she sort of knew.
So she was aware herself that things were changing and
yes.
It bothered her.
Yes.
Now, when did it actually come up in conversation with your father? Because you mentioned that he was in denial. So who was the first person to address the concerns with your dad?
That would be Judy. You might want to discuss this with her.
Okay, Judy, tell me about that.
Well, I say in 1 year, so our mom went into Arden Courts in 2010, but the year prior, I'd say my dad was so in denial, he told Heidi I was infecting. I say I went from an infection to a savior in 1 year because he just didn't want to hear it. The timing was really sad because they were trying to find a place to retire to possibly that might have, levels of care kind of community, a continuing care community, and Heidi had a meal with several of their best friends discussing this, and they all laughed at her and said, we're not ready, this is too soon. And, it turns out, obviously hindsight is 20/20, but of these people, one of them was in Arden Court, several of them died. They were just at a point where I think there may be a point as people get older where they are in denial. And this was the case in this situation.
So when you first brought it up to your dad, did he get angry? Did he say there's nothing wrong? And did you notice, was he covering up for your mom? In other words, was he answering her questions? Was she looking to him for support in answering questions?
I would say so.
Yeah,
and he was denying that anything was wrong. He would leave her to go to a meeting and leave her meds on the table. She was just, we were just seeing signs. You know, it kind of builds. You see something, you're not sure if it really means something, because we all, as we get older, maybe we lose our keys or whatever it is. We're not sure if this is something significant, and especially at a distance. But in her case, she had gotten lost driving with all three of us. I ended up reporting her to the state of Florida after discussing with my sisters and seeing if that was okay with them, because we were so worried that our dad was saying, well, she's just driving to the beauty parlor. You know, this is nothing. It's not. He just really didn't want to know this about his lifelong partner.
Of course.
We saw his level of stress go up. We saw anger coming. I remember once Heidi and I went out and we went shopping. Heidi brought him some licorice as a gift, and he started shouting at her. It was just so out of character for him.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not supposed to eat sugar, and you know, it was just so odd that we had to talk the next day with both parents and said, this is what we see. We see that you're very stressed, and so forth. But
by the way,
really
Dad had a TIA. Remember, Jude?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, I mean, my father was so stressed out that he had a mini stroke in the initial part before Mom went to Arden Courts, because he was supposedly handling all this, you know, and he has his own health challenges too. He was an asthmatic. He had to take all kinds of medicine, and then he took over administering Mom's meds. So it was just, and that was one of the things we said. We tried to explain to Mom when she went to Arden Court or to any facility. We said, you can have a husband now, or you would be a widow, because there's no way that he could have handled his care and hers. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, so he became more of a caregiver at that point, even though it was affecting his health, and he didn't really want to get help, and he didn't want to accept that something was wrong, because, you know, he's your dad, an awesome man, and I knew him pretty well, and he, unfortunately, is like a lot of male caregivers, husbands, they're kind of macho.
Yeah.
And they want to take it on, and they want to do it themselves, and they're going to do it, and they don't, you know, want to accept help or ask for help. And that's probably one of the hardest things, I think, for a lot of men, is because they're, you know, vowed to take care of their spouse till death do us part. And it's really hard for some men to admit that they need help.
Definitely. In my father's case, it was the same. Right, Heidi?
Oh, yeah.
And the guilt, he had a lot of guilt, because he would, right after he put, you know, we all discussed Arden Court, and we had a phone conversation from across the country, our third sisters in the Pennsylvania area, and agreed that this was the right thing to do, especially after his stroke, and it was obvious he couldn't handle this anymore. But early on, he felt that she was so much more advanced than everyone else, and he'd run into a neighbor who took care of her husband at home and think, maybe I should pull her out and take care of her. And there was a lot of guilt early on, which really turned into
people
sorrow.
Said things. I don't think they meant to be cruel or whatever, but they didn't understand, because she still, you know, she looked fine. She could certainly socially comport herself in a decent way, you know. And they didn't. A lot of people said, I don't even understand why he's putting her into, you know, why is she going to Arden, you know, and that would tear Dad apart, because they didn't, it made him wonder as well.
Yes, and we're going to talk more about that. Thank you for bringing that up, Heidi, and we're going to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss that and more. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help, because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
Hi,
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts.
If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
We are back, and joining me today, I have two wonderful guests. They are actually sisters. We have Heidi Hazelcorn calling in from her home in Fort Myers, Florida. And we have Judy Hazelcorn Light actually joining us via video call from her home in California. Thank you, girls and ladies, for joining me today. And I call you girls because I feel like, you know, we're all in this together. And I've known you many, many years and feel very close to you, knowing your parents, as well as I did for several years. So we're talking about your parents, and Mom was diagnosed, but let's go back just for a few minutes before, Dad got real sick. He was exhibiting some signs of stress and some physical stress because of caregiving for things going on with Mom. Were you all, either one of you, involved in getting a diagnosis, going to the doctor and going through all of that process? I know, Judy, you're all the way in California. Heidi, you're in Fort Myers, the other coast of Florida from where your parents lived, and your other sister in Pennsylvania. Were you involved in that process at all, or was your dad willing to give you that kind of information and kind of keep you posted on what was going on? What can you say about that, Judy?
Involved from afar and get doctor's appointments set when we were visiting. My sister Faye had the idea of having someone come in and evaluate my parents, and we actually had to pretend it was a friend of ours. We paid a service to come in and look at their home and see how they were doing and discuss, and she gave us a detailed report. And again, we had to basically lie to our father because he was so in denial that there was anything wrong at all. So it adds a huge layer of stress. I'm sure that, I'll never experience living through this other than with my mother-in-law being in the same town, which is great. But doing this from afar is rough. And we finally got our dad to take her to a neurologist, where she got an unofficial. You can't really. The thinking back then was you can't get the Alzheimer's diagnosis until someone dies and they look at the brain and so forth. But it was obvious that something was going on with our mother. So.
And was it distressing, or was it more of a relief to either one of you to finally put a name on it, to finally find out what it was, why Mom was behaving the way she was? Heidi, was it a relief for you, or was it more distressing?
It was relief because it had a name, and I could then read about it and speak to people and whatever. But it was also incredibly sad, and it was both things at the same time.
Yeah. And Heidi, how many years, if you can recall, did your mother suffer with this diagnosis of dementia?
Well, I think Judy, I think she was diagnosed 7 years ago, but I think she had it at least a year before, at least.
It was more than that. In fact, I remember her coming out to my daughter's high school graduation, and we were standing in a gift shop. She picked up a card, and the card said, I was just standing by her, and the card said, "I smile and I nod," and you open it up and it says, "Because I don't know what's going on." and she's holding this card, and she said, "That's me." And
Oh, wow.
that really,
Yeah, that's right.
that really struck me. And they
Yeah.
were still living in their condo together and all that. So
Yeah.
she was aware.
She was aware. And I want to make a point, too. And I said a diagnosis of dementia, that dementia is not really a diagnosis. But like you mentioned, back when she went to the doctor, a lot of doctors don't want to say specifically what kind of dementia it is. They should, do all the tests and go through all the blood work and go through all the scans of the brain to try to pinpoint what kind of dementia it is. But if they can't pinpoint it by doing all of those things, most times they will say it's dementia of the Alzheimer's type. So even though they might not come out and say this is Alzheimer's disease, and we have to do a brain autopsy to find, which isn't true anymore, but that's what a lot of doctors would say back, many years ago. It's dementia of the Alzheimer's type, because we can't determine, is it a vascular dementia from like a stroke, or is it some other type of dementia? So for all intents purposes, when we say dementia, most times we're talking about an Alzheimer's type dementia. So she got her diagnosis, and then did you think that your dad was more accepting because he actually heard that from the doctor, Judy?
I don't know if accepting would be the word for it. Maybe he got a little bit desperate. I remember him chasing some cures. He was kind of prey, as many people are. You start reading about it, and somebody says that they found a cure, and it's very easy to victimize people at this point in time. And so that was, I think he was just desperate. He didn't really want to believe it.
Yes,
And
remember
really
there was some doctor,
even early on in Arden Courts, and our mom was there for, what was she there for, since 2007? 2010, excuse me. She was there 7 years, since 2010. Early on, his belief was if he took her out and he did things with her and kept her busy, maybe he could forestall it. Maybe he could control it. And the executive director at Arden Courts in Delray Beach at the time said, at some point she's going to fall off the cliff. So he just worked harder and harder to see her all the time and provide stimulation and socialization, and he was very much involved in all the activities. They have wonderful activities at Arden Court, and music, and they have pet therapy, and they have word games and all kinds of things, and he was very much involved in that to try to, in his mind, forestall this fall off a cliff.
Yes, your dad was very dedicated, a very dedicated husband, caregiver. He was there all the time and participated with her, and was always taking her out and going to lunch and keeping her stimulated. And I think he enjoyed spending time with her. He really enjoyed time with her. She was a very lovely social person, and I'm sure that stimulation and that social time that he gave her, in addition to what she experienced, in the community, actually helped, because the doctors do say that proper stimulation, mental, physical, and socialization will help stave off, symptoms a little bit longer, that people can have a little bit better quality of life if these things are present. So I think your dad did a marvelous job of supplementing what she got at the community. And he was a wonderful man, a wonderful caregiver. But now that we know this, I was actually involved in the process of Mom coming into Arden Courts, because Dad had gotten so sick and he was going to have some surgery. So it was it was by necessity that Mom had to come, because you all were long and far away, and she needed a place to be safe and cared for while Dad had his surgery and recuperated. So I remember that he was so ill at the time. He had heart problems, and I remember he was so ill at the time that I actually went to their condo to have him sign the paperwork because he was the responsible party and had all his legal documents, already in place with his power of attorney and all that. And I went to his condo and, was signing the papers and everything. And so she moved into Arden Courts. So she wasn't there maybe a few months before, and you'll have to jog my memory, before one of you sisters came to visit and picked up Mom to take her to the condo to visit Dad because he had been recuperating. He was feeling a little. Who was that?
Judy.
That was me, because nobody thought it was a good idea that I bring her back. They were shocked. I don't think they would have approved of it.
We were dead set
early
against
on.
it.
Okay, so but you do what you feel is right, and and of course it wasn't something that that we would be against, but you always want to do the best for the person. And of course your dad was anxious to see her because he was recuperating. So Judy, you fly in from California, pick Mom up, take her to the condo to get Dad to all go to lunch. And when you came back with Mom to bring her back to Arden Courts, you told me a story. Do you want to tell the story?
Well, yeah, sure. I picked her up, and as we're driving there, of course, she's only been in Arden Courts now 8 months. It's less than a year. And she's saying, gee, I don't recognize, we're driving, I don't recognize any of this. And we get into the apartment, and she looks around, and she says, boy, this is hideous. She looks at a piece of her artwork that she'd gotten in Europe or somewhere and says, boy, that's ugly. And she sits there a while and visited. She's glad to see our dad. And then she says, I'm ready to go home. And that was a real breakthrough. It was a real moment of, okay, this is no longer home. It was very sad. It was very bittersweet. And
it was also, I think, really encouraging, Judy, because it meant that she was comfortable at Arden Court.
Definitely. We felt, okay, this is the right move, obviously. We were shocked. I mean, I was shocked that she wouldn't, she looked around and basically said, this is a nice place, but oh, what an ugly piece of artwork that she fixed on. And then, it was like the important thing there was our dad, who she never forgot until the day she died. She never forgot him. And she realized that home, we realized that, and I think it was a relief for our father, who had been sick and ill, that, okay, as sad as it was, she's at home where she's living now. This is where she needs to be. If she's sitting on the couch and says, I'm tired, let's go home, there it is.
So
and she did that frequently after that first time. If you take her to lunch or to whatever, if she got tired, she'd say, I want to go home.
And when she said home, she meant Arden Courts.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, they moved to Florida and retired, bought the condo, and they'd lived in it about 20 years. It wasn't about 20 years they had it before Rita had to move out. Yeah.
20. Yeah.
And I remember, Judy, when you brought her back and you stopped by my office and you said, Marcia, I have to tell you, and I'll never forget your words, because you said, I took Mom up there, and you said, we walked in, Mom looked around, and she said, what is this place? It looks hideous. And I was shocked to hear that from you, because the family was so adamant about Mom's not that bad, and does she really need to be in a place, and why can't she go back and live with Dad? And then for you to tell me the story, it's sort of kind of cemented, like you all just said, that this was the right thing to do, that she did need this extra support, for her memory. But a lot of people that were, that are in your shoes, or that are going through your shoes, and the trials of moving someone into a community, they get real worried and very concerned about taking someone out of their home. But here's a woman who decorated this beautiful condo on the beach, lived in it for 20 years, was away for a mere 7 or 8 months, and didn't remember anything about it.
Yes.
And I think that is shocking to some people and very eye-opening too.
Mm-hmm.
And
definitely, it was a turning point for everyone, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Both sad and very positive in terms of my dad questioning himself and then realizing, wow, he really wanted me to bring her back. I don't know if my other sisters would have done it. I don't know. I just wanted to see what I was also so curious, having gone through this with my mother-in-law. I was so curious to see what she would say and how she would feel. And that really, I think that was one point that really helped him because he
And one of the things,
then,
Judy, I remember you telling us, and I said,
was shocking,
I said
but it was kind of comforting that she was where she needed to be at Arden Court.
Yeah, but one of the reasons I was against it was I remember I said to you, what if she doesn't want to go back to Arden Court? What if she won't leave? What if she just physically won't leave? And when she said, I want to go home, that was not a problem. That's what I was worried about.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because when people that are suffering from Alzheimer's, when they say they want to go home, sometimes home isn't necessarily a physical place.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes home isn't what they remember the last place they lived, as in the case of your mom for 20 years at the condo. That really wasn't what she was referring to because she was there when she said it. Sometimes home is maybe the place where they grew up with their parents.
Right.
And to me, I think that sometimes it's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think home, if you think about it, where do we all want to be when, we want to feel safe, when we're not feeling good, or we want to be where we feel comfortable? We want to be home. And Rita had been at Arden Courts long enough to get established, to feel that she was safe, that she was comfortable, and she had everything that she needed, and she had people who truly cared for her, and that's why she felt it was home for her and that she belonged there at that point in time.
Definitely.
I agree.
Yeah, and I try to explain that to caregivers a lot of time is home doesn't necessarily mean the last place that you lived. Mm-hmm. And so we're so glad that Rita did find home at Arden Courts. We're going to take a next commercial break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Do you need the advice of an elder?
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know. We understand. We can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look
Caregiver Solutions.
We're back, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Community. Arden Courts has about 50 communities across the United States, 10 here in Florida, the rest sprinkled around the Northeast and the Midwest, and even down into Texas. And Arden Courts is wonderful because memory care is all they do. So although it is an assisted living, it is a specific type of assisted living, and memory care is the kind of assisted living that they do there at Arden Courts. And so if you are looking for help and you need a support group, you'd like to get some education and go to a seminar, you can locate the Arden Courts closest to you and check it out. But Arden Courts is very concerned about you, the caregiver, too, the family caregiver. And they have a lot of resources. One of them is this book. It's called The 36-Hour Day. Arden Courts would like to give it to you free just for the asking. All you have to do is call their toll-free number and tell them free offer on the Caregiver Solution info show, and they'll get your name and address and mail a copy right to you. So take a pen and pencil, a paper, and write down this number, 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. And call Arden Courts and ask for your free copy of the 36-Hour Day book. It's a wonderful resource for families. Lots of great tips, definitions, information. It's a great book to either read from cover to cover or to skim it and go to any topic and any chapter that you need at the time. So I highly recommend this book, and please get it as soon as possible. So my guests today, I have two sisters, they're Heidi and Judy, and they're joining me today, one from California and one from Fort Myers, Florida, over the phone and the video call. And we're talking about their parents and how the family has to come together, especially when the adult children are scattered across the United States and they're trying to help mom and dad. And unfortunately, dad had health problems, necessitated some intervention when mom became ill. She had memory loss, diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and they are telling us their story in the hopes that others will hear and could relate and maybe know that you're not alone on this journey. Every journey is different, and if this is your case where you're far away from family and you wonder what you should do, you can, listen and maybe take some tips from these wonderful daughters who were very involved in the care of their parents. So we're bringing back on video with Judy from California and Heidi on the phone joining us from Fort Myers. So I want to address the fact that your dad was very involved in your mother's care, and like we said before commercial, that he visited her all the time. I mean, he was there all the time, except for when he was so ill that he couldn't be there. When your dad was there, he actually became involved also and close to other family of residents and staff and some of the other residents that actually live there. Do you think that your dad found some of his social needs met by meeting up with other caregivers and joining these support groups? What do you think, Judy?
Most definitely. He went every 2 weeks. There was a support group, and he joined the families. There was also a wonderful sense of consistency and of people going through the same situation that he was going through in general. So he would go. Arden Court is great about having all kinds of celebrations, Thanksgiving, not just the holidays, but they have special. They even had a celebration for people that had been married a long time to renew their vows, which was adorable. And so they dressed up, mom and dad, and several other couples that were married, and got to feel very special, as if they were doing something important, and the families came. The support is a huge piece of this. Otherwise, he would have really felt alone. In fact, our dad was in a seniors community, but most of his life was dedicated to our mother. I mean, he had a few things he did in his community, but the majority of his life was clearly dedicated and devoted to her care and being with her. So the support that he got from the staff and from the other families and sharing the situations really helped.
Yeah, did you want to add anything to that, Heidi?
No, I think Judy said it all, but not only did he have relationships with other caregivers and the residents at Arden Court, but I know he really loved and cherished Jacobo, who was someone who volunteered his time and would come every week or every other week and discuss current events. And he just, it really was a family for him, and it really, I think, helped him on so many levels.
Yeah, you're right. Caregivers, especially spouses that have been married a long time and they're not close to family, a lot of them, retired to Florida and family scattered around, they need to keep that social connection and keep friends. And sometimes long friends that you've had for a long time, sort of fade away or walk away when there's issues with dementia because they don't understand it, or they're afraid of it, or they don't know what to do, or they don't know what to say. So a lot of spouses find that they're no longer in their special social group any longer, and now they have to form new friendships and new social connections, which is very, very important. And I think that when you're in a community and you're with others, in the same boat as you are, and going to those support groups and going to those social functions is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. The other thing we found is that a lot of people whose spouses had lived in Arden Court, maybe passed away like Jacobo, come back and then devote their time. I can think of 3 staff people in particular that would either do weekly events, whether some of them were religious, some of them were political, right, yeah. Conversations, but they would come to the facility and donate their time, which really shows how much they appreciated Arden Court and that they wanted to give back because they had been through it. And those were the kind of people that helped our father get through this.
Yeah, and people are so gracious, to do that, and they really do want to help because they understand. They understand what you're going through and what they went through, and there's that camaraderie right there. So, Judy, I want to ask you a question. You had said earlier in the show that your mother-in-law had suffered with Alzheimer's, and you had a little bit of experience, with her situation, being that she lived closer to you out there in California. Did the experience with your mother-in-law prepare you for dealing with your own mother, or did you find similarities, or were there huge differences?
Well, my husband used to say when my mother-in-law got Alzheimer's, she forgot what she hated about me, which is kind of funny, but it's true. We actually had the gift of being able to have a good relationship after she was diagnosed because I was able to help her in ways that he couldn't. It's different when, I guess you're asking, it's different when it's your mother-in-law and then your mother. This was helpful in my being able to see what was really happening in advance. So it was kind of a benefit. But am I answering your question here?
Well, yes, that's a good answer. And I just wanted to see if there were similarities in their behaviors or the way that their dementia exhibited itself. And were you surprised by anything, actually?
One of the sayings I love, and I'm sure you've heard this, is if you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's. And the meaning behind that is that everyone has their deficits in a different way. So my mother always had a deficit with time. She had confusion about time. My mother-in-law had, used to have a photographic memory, and so she had various other difficulties. Yes. However, if you take the umbrella of dementia and Alzheimer's, it was helpful to have had this experience with our mother-in-law. And as I say, when families go through this, sometimes it's like tracing back, the breadcrumbs, looking back and saying, wait a minute, okay, my husband's mom never forgot anything, and here she left and forgot her bathing suit. Doesn't seem so significant. But then you pair that together with a call, an anxiety call in the middle of the night, and you start pairing these. Then a friend calls and says she's confused, and all these things start coming together. It was unfortunate, but I do feel grateful and lucky in the sense that it was my mother-in-law first, because I was a little bit more detached from it than my own mother. It's not that it wasn't horribly difficult, but it's different when it's your mother-in-law. You don't have the same relationship, obviously, as you do with a mother.
Right.
So
Well, I wanted to ask Heidi. Heidi, we talked about this a little bit before, but you know, your dad was ill. He had a lot of health problems, and you know, he was a primary family caregiver for your mom. Do you think he was worried about him going first, dying
course he
before
was.
she did?
Yeah. Well,
And
he had he always would say, I just want 24 hours after your mother died. You know, I just want to outlive her by 24 hours, because he wanted to take care of her until the end. His goal was to live 24 hours after she did.
I'm sorry, Hyde, I can't hear you. 24 hours?
After Mom, that he could live 24 hours after Mom passed, so that he could, be there for the whatever. It was a very big concern of his. He did not want to predecease her.
yeah, and so what had happened was he did, unfortunately.
Yep.
But by how long?
68 days, and they would have been married 68 years had this year. 68 days he predeceased her.
So
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. They died.
Okay, yes.
He died first, and she died 60.
Yes.
We moved her to the Arden Court
she died
in Fort
68
Myers,
days
which
later.
had been the plan, and he knew and agreed with that plan that if he predeceased her, we would move her closer to where Heidi lived, and then she ended up passing away 68 days after.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that Rita, your mom, realized that Dad was gone? Did you tell her, or did you decide not to tell her the sad news that he had passed away?
Well, Judy, what was that conversation I had with her? One time she looked at me and she said, I've tried to forget everything in my life that doesn't make me smile, so I've really forgotten a lot about this. At one point, didn't she ask me, Judy, if Dad was alive or not after he had died?
Right before he died. We had a couple of amazing experiences. First of all, half the time she couldn't remember. In the last year, let's say, she would say, "Where's my husband?" She couldn't remember his name. And the last day that she saw him, she said, she called him Abe. He left the car. I dropped him off, and she said, Abe. She knew. We believe that she knew.
Yeah.
Whether someone told her or not, she knew that he had passed away.
And she assumed that he was. She asked me once, actually, is my husband dead or alive?
Yes.
And
that
I was
the first
stunned.
time she ever asked that, and all the time. And that was shortly before he died, actually.
Yeah.
But when he actually passed, the family never came out directly and told her.
No, she never knew.
Mm-hmm. And you felt that there was no reason to upset her because, you
we
didn't.
were advised two different ways. We'll just leave it at that. One of the hospice nurses advised us a certain way, and then Arden Court staff advised us another way, and we decided to honor the Arden Court staff's. Based on her situation, her personality, they felt it would be traumatic to her and how bonded she was to him.
Mm-hmm.
But we still believe that she knew somewhere inside her.
Yeah, instinctively somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before we wrap up, I want to ask you any words of wisdom that either of you want to give to caregivers when they're going through things like this, or anything that you learned that you were surprised about?
I will say, Heidi, I feel very fortunate that my sisters and I and our dad were really united, because I've gone to support groups myself, and there's a lot of complaining about who's doing the most work in this. I feel that we were very fortunate in the parents we had and the way they raised us, and the fact that we were able to bond together. And that's, to me, is the most important thing, is you're going through it together. If you can come together with your siblings and support each other, get the help you need. Whether you're near or far, that's the most important thing you can do to get through this, because it's very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Try to be a united front, because it's hard enough to deal with it without having those terrible family dynamics. Anything that you'd like to say, Heidi, as we close?
I agree totally with Judy, and I would just say patience. Just patience is necessary, and it's a lot easier said than done. but you just have to be patient and loving, and that's all I can say.
Well, thank you. Those were good words. Thank you both for being with us today. You were awesome at letting us into your lives and hear your story, and hopefully other caregivers can relate. Thank you for joining us from California and Fort Myers, and I wish nothing but the best for both of you in this new year.
Thank you, and thank you to you and to Arden Court for taking such incredible care of our mother and father as well.
You're very welcome. And thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. I hope you join us. In the meantime, don't forget, give somebody a hug because they need it and so do you. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you